Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. I've written a plea for the Congo, and I'm intending to send it to the President of the United States of America, Mr. Joe Biden, but also to the US Congress, and share it with a lot of people, either in form of a video or in form of an email, any file. Please ask for it, and when you get it, read it, follow if it's a video, and make sure you share it with a lot of people in the world, so that together we can inform the world about what's really going on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So let me read the plea in question. A plea for the Great Congo. I'm addressing this plea for the Great Congo to the following people: to His Excellency, the President of the United States of America, Mr. Joe Biden, to members of the US Congress, to the Congolese people, the legitimate owners of the country named the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to the American people, and to other people in the world, those who love justice, peace, and the truth. It's been 20 years that many people have wondered constantly what's really happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. What is making that nothing is working on the political, economic, social, security levels, and so on and so forth. On behalf of the Congolese people, I'd like to explain it in clear terms, because often the traditional media do it according to the interest of those who control them. Having Congolese blood in my veins, but also being an American taxpayer, I believe that I have the sacred and undisputed right to tell the world about the great ordeal that's going on in the Great Congo. Because every time a Congolese suffers, I suffer. Every time a Congolese weeps, I weep. Every time a Congolese bleeds, I bleed. Every time a Congolese is murdered, I am murdered. No one can really feel the suffering of the Congolese people in the flesh, except those who share a blood tie with the Congolese people and the Congo. His Excellency, Mr. President of the United States of America, dear members of the US Congress, dear American people, dear Congolese people, and men of goodwill all over the world. Horrible things have been happening in the Great Congo since 1998. A genocide. Yes, the genocide of the Congolese people has been taking place in the Great Congo for 20 years. But the so-called civilized world is doing everything in its power to either minimize or completely hide it. The Congolese people are victims of a second most horrific genocide in human history, which has so far claimed the lives of 12 million people. And the perpetrators of this genocide are mainly Rwandan soldiers from the Kagame's regime and Ugandan soldiers from the Museveni's regime. It's been 20 years since the armies of these two countries, benefiting from the financial and logistical support of certain well-known Western countries, certain banks, certain multinational companies, and certain accomplices in Congolese political circles, they destabilize and create chaos in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They've been attacking the Congolese people for 20 years, attacking towns and villages, killing inhabitants, raping women, displacing populations, occupying the land, looting the flora, the fauna, and other minerals which they transport to Rwanda and Uganda that have become hubs for the international mafia, where the transactions of the wealth of blood stolen in the DR Congo are carried out. If we are talking about the second genocide today, it's because the same Congolese people have already been victim of a first genocide which took place during the colonial era, when the cruel system put in place by Leopold II, the King of Belgians, ravaged the Belgian Congo and claimed the lives of 10 million Congolese. As history indicates, this was the time when the colonial system cut hundreds of thousands of feet and hands of the natives who were made to work without rest to extract iron from the quarries and rubber that were being used to fuel and advance the automotive industry. It was the first most horrible genocide in the history of mankind. No people were slaughtered so much before. Like the genocide in the colonial era, today's genocide is coupled with systematic looting of Congo's wealth. And this is done in the face of several world governments and international institutions such as the government of the United States of America, the Great Britain, Canada, Australia, Belgium, France, and other institutions such as the United Nations, the European Union, the African Union, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. But unfortunately, these entities have chosen silence because they profit from the murderous dirty job that Kagame's and Museveni's armies have been carrying out in the Congo. And whenever there are people who stand up to talk about this vile tragedy, everything is done to ignore them, to discourage them, to muzzle them, to threaten them, to chase them, and if necessary, to completely erase them. His Excellency, Mr. President of the United States of America, let me remind you that I recently watched a video of your intervention during a hearing held on the 23rd of July, 1986 in the Senate in front of Mr. George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State for the Reagan administration. You are debating the massacres and other atrocities of which the Black South African people were victims at the hands of the government of the Afrikaners, this white minority made up of segregationists. You spoke passionately on behalf of the Black South Africans who were scarred by this horrific apartheid regime. You blamed the ambiguous position, often called inaction, of the United States of America towards the cruel regime of those white Afrikaners who, for years, excoriated, crushed, killed the Black South African people simply because they were black. and also they were the majority. You said that America had no loyalty to the cruel Afrikaner regime, but America should have loyalty to the suffering South Africans. And you said you were ashamed of the United States policy who had no moral backbone. As I listened to you speaking, Mr. President, I saw in you a kind man who can make a difference today. Because in view of the atrocities taking place in the Congo today, we can still say that the US foreign policy towards the Democratic Republic of the Congo lacks morality. Because instead of being loyal to the Congolese people, America has proved to be loyal to the killers of the Congolese people and the looters of the Congolese wealth. That is why, Mr. President, I'm addressing this plea for the Great Congo in the form of an open letter to your illustrious office and to the United States Congress. And if possible, with your permission, I prefer to come and hand it over to you personally at the White House and also at the United States Congress, because this plea is the cry of desolation from the Congolese people who've been suffering and dying for 20 years, far from the eyes of the so-called civilized world. Mr. President, if the crimes in South Africa touched and revolted you so much, the crimes in the Congo must revolt you 1,000,000 times. Yes, Mr. President, let me insist that the Congo is dying. And that is why I appeal to you, because I know that unlike other presidents who had occupied the Oval Office before you since 1998, and who chose to close their eyes to the genocide of the Congolese people, you are going to make a difference. For the record, I think it's useful to tell you that at each historical turning point that sees the progress of humanity, the Great Congo has always been present, giving its best to advance the science and humanity, but never receiving anything in return. During colonial times, it was the Congo's metals and rubber that drove the automotive industry forward. During World War II, it was the uranium from the Great Congo that ended the war when it was used as a force of annihilation and deterrence against the enemy, thus making the United States of America a superpower on the face of the earth. But unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't know that if America is a superpower today, it's thanks to the uranium from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But the Congolese people have never enjoyed a kind of friendship with the United States of America, because the first big gift that the USA and Belgium gave the Congolese people just after the Congo independence was to kill their democracy in order to impose a dictator, Mobutu, who looted the country for 3 decades. And the same Western world estimated Mobutu's net worth at 10 billion US dollars in Western banks. But unfortunately, since his death in 1997, there's never been a trace of that fortune that could have served the well-being of the Congolese people. But now, what has brought chaos in the DR Congo? Who is killing the Congolese people today? Here is the answer. Today we live in a world where electronics cover almost every aspect of life. Hence, the need to use electronic devices such as smartphones, electric cars, drones, computers, space shuttles, and other multiple devices in the field of medicine, agriculture, security, armament, and so on and so forth. And to achieve this, it's necessary to have a large amount of basic minerals such as cobalt and coltan. And it turns out that the Great Congo has between 60 and 80% of the world reserves of each of these minerals. Hence, the source of the tragedy that the Congo is experiencing. Some Western governments and multinational companies need these minerals to make huge profits and boost their economy. But instead of forming a partnership to buy them from the Congolese people, they chose to grab them by force using illegal means. From there, they had to find some house niggers who could do the dirty job for them. They then found Mr. Yoweri Museveni, the current president of Uganda, and Mr. Paul Kagame, the current president of Rwanda, as agents who could steal these minerals for them in the DR Congo. Thus, for 20 years, these powerful governments and multinationals have been giving all possible means, financial, military, logistics, to train regular army soldiers and other armed groups in Rwanda and Uganda, and then to deploy them in the Congo to loot these minerals. Upon entering the Congo, Kagame's and Museveni's armed groups attack towns and villages, massacre inhabitants, rape women and girls, displace populations, grab the land, loot the flora, the fauna, and occupy territories rich in coltan, gold, and other minerals, and start exploiting them. Thus, in the space of 20 years of regular attacks on the Congolese territory, the Kagame's and Museveni's regimes have killed tens of millions of Congolese, nearly 12 million. They looted minerals estimated to be worth hundreds of billions of US dollars. They have displaced tens of millions of Congolese from their land in the eastern Congo and have occupied those lands, even intending to annex them to Rwanda and Uganda. In 20 years, Rwanda and Uganda have served as breeding grounds for training young people who are armed and then deployed in the Congo to engage in massacres. But also, these two countries have transformed over the years into real hubs for the international mafia, where the wealth looted in the Congo, such as minerals, flora, and even fauna, are sold and bought. And this with the complicity of certain large international organizations such as the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and other NGOs and foundations that know very well that in Rwanda there is no coltan, no gold mine. But without any shame, they declare that Rwanda is a great producer of this wealth, which is really a big disgrace for the so-called civilized world. Mr. President of the United States of America, dear members of the US Congress, dear Congolese people, dear American people, and all the men of goodwill throughout the world, let me tell you that there are reasons that must unite us and federate our efforts so that we can save the great Congo, the Congo of Lumumba. These are the reasons. Not only is the great Congo one of Africa's richest countries, it's widely regarded as the richest country in the world in terms of natural resources, because its untapped deposit of raw minerals are estimated to be worth over 24 trillion US dollars. It's also home to the second largest tropical forest in the world after the Amazon, a forest very rich in biodiversity that helps stabilize the global climate by absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but also by creating precipitation and moderating temperatures. The Great Congo also has 80 million acres of arable land that can feed double the population of the African continent. It also has a mighty river, the Congo River, some streams and lakes that can essentially provide electricity to all sub-Saharan Africa. Yes, the Congo is vital and very important for the progress and the future of Africa. Also, a stable and developed Congo is a developed Africa and a better world. Here is a reason why Africa and the world must stand up to plead for the great Congo, to snatch this beautiful and great country from the hands of all these adventurers and gangsters who've been suffocating it since 1996. During these 20 years, the ordeal of the Congolese people has endured because there are many actors, both internationally and nationally, actors who are supposed to work to bring real peace to the Congo just after the war of aggression of 1996. But unfortunately, these actors, they all started playing in favor of the enemy of the Congo by positioning themselves against the Congolese people. And I'm going to give you some examples. There is the United Nations, which through MONUSCO has proven its inability to protect the Congolese people and the Congolese territory despite the presence of its contingent of nearly 20,000 peacekeepers, which is also the largest contingent in the history of the United Nations on the ground of a country in conflict. Surprisingly, MONUSCO agents have been playing more the role of tourists and inactive witnesses who observe the Congolese people being beheaded, raped, massacred by armed groups from Rwanda, Uganda, and many others trained on the Congolese territory by these two enemy countries. MONUSCO has shown its limits. And for years, the Congolese people have been asking this entity either to truly protect the Congolese people and the Congolese territory, or simply to leave the Congo. We have also other actors, some Western countries, the givers of lessons of democracy and good governance, led by the United States of America. All these countries have failed to accompany the Congo on the path to peace, democracy, and the respect of the law. All of them turned a blind eye to the electoral fraud that has persisted in the DRC since the 2006 presidential election, giving rise to the crisis of legitimacy and instability of institutions. They also closed their eyes to the genocide of the Congolese people, but also to the systematic looting of minerals and other wealth. Thus, they've betrayed the Congolese people by abandoning them in the midst of a crisis fabricated from abroad. We also have a great deal of multinational companies, more than 300. These companies have been signing contracts and exploiting the DRC wealth for the past 20 years, knowing very well that at this very moment, the Congo is a jungle with no law and no state. A jungle created on purpose and maintained by some powerful foreign lobbies that have just delegated some warlords from all over the Great Lakes region to rule it, to the detriment of the Congolese people. Thus, for the Congolese people, all these mining operations that have been carried out for 20 years are illegal and are considered as looting and must be investigated because they have never benefited the Congolese people. We also have the Congolese warlords who've been involved in various crimes alongside the Rwandan and Ugandan armies, and who still occupy the Congolese political scene, blocking any democratic progress and any advancement on human rights issues and establishment of an international tribunal to judge the genocide of the Congolese people. The Congolese people are asking these warlords to resign, please. There's also the entire Congolese political class, which is made up of the most unconscious and corrupt men and women in the world, who have no sense of honor or urgency to place the nation's higher interest above all else. For more than 20 years, these people showed no sign of patriotism that could push them to save the DRC. But all of them spend their time quarreling and fighting for positions and money, leaving the poor Congolese people to fend for themselves. For example, the Kabila family looted the Congo in 18 years in power and grabbed many of the DRC's mining patents and several other juicy businesses, turning the country into a private property. As for Mr. Felix Tshisekedi, barely installed as president after a non-constitutional arrangement, he managed to embezzle more than $400 million during the first 100 days of his presidency. And after 2 years of the same negotiated presidency, nothing is going on in the Congo. Mass killings and lootings are increasing throughout the DRC without the president saying anything or finding any lasting solution. And you're going to ask why. But the answer is very simple. It's because his presidency didn't come from the Congolese people, who are the first sovereign. But his presidency came from foreign interest groups who have already taken the Congo hostage. And this system of taking the Congo hostage since 1998 has allowed the Museveni and Kagame's regimes to deploy and maintain the armed groups in certain areas in the eastern part of the Congo, where they slaughter Congolese people and expel others from their land. And apart from the exploitation of minerals and other riches of the Congo, the Kagame regime is already proceeding with the transfer of population of Rwandan origin from their country into the Democratic Republic of the Congo to occupy the territory, because their goal is never to leave the DRC, which is the land of milk and honey that has made their fortune after all these years of looting. And the Kagame's regime is already pushing further their project of rectifying the history of the Congo and modifying the borders inherited from the colonial era to annex certain territories of the Congo to Rwanda. And this is one of the reasons for the relentlessness on the Congo. His Excellency, the President of the United States, dear members of the United States Congress, dear Congolese people, the American people, and all men of goodwill throughout the world. Considering all the grievances I've just listed above, the Congolese people insist that the following recommendations be implemented as quickly as possible, as they alone can bring positive change in the DR Congo. Number one, the establishment of an international criminal tribunal for the genocide of the Congolese people, before which the Rwandan and Ugandan civil and military authorities and their Congolese accomplices will have to answer for their crimes in the DRC. The review, number two, the review of the entire political, economic, and security system in the DRC, which is deeply infiltrated by foreigners, especially Rwandans and Ugandans, who work night and day for the destabilization of the Congo and who have succeeded in 20 years to initiate, develop, and perpetuate chaos, which is the only way that allows them to empty the towns and villages of the Congo with their inhabitants. Why do they do that? It's to better occupy and loot the Congo. We also ask, please, may the international community help the Congo to completely distance itself from Kagame's and Museveni's regimes and all the allies who bring chaos in the DRC. We therefore demand that immediate closure of the embassies of these two enemy countries and the complete cessation of all economic cooperation until the International Criminal Tribunal on the genocide of the Congolese people will deliver the verdict. Number three, we ask some Western countries to stop the discrimination policy which consists in pouring out important funds and investing in the training and the making of the very armies that invade the DRC, while the Congo army is neglected without any assistance or relegated to lower quality training. This deliberate discrimination has only weakened the Congo and left it prey to predators. Number 4, the establishment of a national commission made up of daughters and sons of the Congo, headed by traditional leaders, in order to identify the Congolese in all the villages and territories in the grip of the occupation, in order to put an end to the systemic infiltration by Rwanda and Uganda of the political and economic system and the secret services of the DRC. Infiltration which has weakened all the efforts of the Congolese people to restore order and peace in the Congo. Number 5, the recovery of the eastern part of the Great Congo, of all the territories which have so far been occupied by Rwandan and Ugandan armed men, with other foreign communities who control and exploit them illegally up to this day. Here, it's necessary to settle once for all the question of the commune of Minembwe in South Kivu, which is a Congolese territory and therefore must be put back under the control of the Congolese government. Number 6, to put an end once for all to the macabre project of the Rwandan and Ugandan government, their ever-growing desire to want to annex certain Congolese territories to their countries with the help of certain foreign powers and multinationals, while falsifying the real history behind those territories. We know that the Great Congo is a land of milk and honey, and it's always hard to get out of it once you are in. Number 7, the exhumation of the mapping report, which has been rotting in the drawers of the United Nations since the year 2009, and the creation of an international tribunal for the genocide of the Congolese people as soon as possible, where all individuals, groups of people, and companies who've been involved in the genocide of the Congolese people and the plundering of the flora, the fauna, and minerals in the Great Congo, even the illegal occupation of the Congolese territory, must be held accountable. Because only true justice will bring back true lasting peace in the DRC. His Excellency, Mr. President of the United States of America, dear members of the US Congress, dear American people, dear Congolese people, and all men who love peace and justice throughout the world. We believe it's time for something to be done urgently to save what is left of the Congo. To refuse to do so is to deny humanity to the Congolese people, because until proven otherwise, the Congolese people are human beings just like everyone else, and therefore they deserve better than what we can see today in the Congo. Look, when there was genocide in Rwanda in 1994, the world's big institutions were eager to put in place everything necessary to rebuild Rwanda, but also to judge the crimes that resulted from that genocide. And for information, the Rwanda genocide claimed the lives of 800,000 people only, while in the Great Congo, there are 12 million lives lost, which means it's 15 times the genocide in Rwanda and 2 times the Holocaust of the Jewish people. But we don't understand why 20 years later, there is still no tribunal for the genocide of the Congolese people. This is insane. By your attitude, we clearly realize that you only love the Congo and its minerals, but you don't love the Congolese people. Prove us the opposite. The ball is in your court now, and we believe the time to act is now. Therefore, we present to you this plea for the Great Congo, which is at the same time a testimony of the abandonment and the planned destruction of the Great Congo and the future of the Congolese people. In the meantime, we ask all men of goodwill around the world to stand up and support the Great Congo and the Congolese people so that justice can be done, because together we can make a difference. May God bless the Great Congo. May God bless the Congolese people and all those who stand up every day to demand that justice be done in the Congo. Yes, let's stand up to save the Great Congo. Made in the United States. This Monday, February 8th, 2021, by Mark Lushimba. And this is the plea for the Great Congo. By listening to it, I think you're going to have an idea about what's really going on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I know a lot of people from many countries, a lot of big companies, a lot of governments in Europe, America, they have their own versions of the things that are taking place in the Congo. But this version is the very simple one, the version of the Congolese people who live, who experience all that hardship that's happening in the Congo now. Things are very easy. People can understand what is going on in the Congo. But if nothing has been done up to now, it's because a lot of people don't want to do anything because they're taking advantage of the chaos that's going on in the Congo. So please share this plea for the Great Congo. Thank you.